Hello, Richard, and thank you for joining the ProTV News. It's a pleasure to talk to you. You are one of the most famous business journalists in the world. I'm going to ask you the question on everybody's mind. When do you think the economic crisis will be over?
I think if you look at what's happening in various countries at the moment, we can certainly say that the worst is over. Now, that may not seem to be the case if you're living in Greece or some of the other countries, maybe Italy, Ireland, even the UK, where there is still large recessionary forces that are still at operation. But the truth is, 18 months ago, Andrea, we were looking into the abyss. That is no longer the case. However, we are now in the position of the patient that's getting over a long and painful operation. Imagine deep cancer surgery has taken place on the global economy. It's going to take time for us to recover.
Of course, we are interested especially in your opinion on Eastern Europe and Romania, of course.
Well, the interesting thing about the Eastern European and particularly the new entrants to the European Union, they, if you like, they started from a lower base, so they didn't fall as far or as fast. Therefore, they will recover quickly. And there is one other aspect to them. They are still being, a lot of the countries in the new Europe are being the beneficiaries of European support. So that will also help. And finally, they do have a lower cost base. So as higher cost manufacturing jobs do transfer from the more expensive countries within the Union, the Germanys, the UKs, the Frances, that shift will continue. On the downside, before you get too excited, Andrea, a lot of the countries in the Eastern European blocs were not particularly well run economically. Therefore, high deficits, poor government controls, poor transparency, often bordering on corruption. In many cases, those are issues that have still got to be addressed if those countries are to enjoy the full benefits of the recovery.
What do you consider to be the secret, the key measure to end the crisis?
I think steady as she goes. I mean, what we don't want to see happen is there is a real risk and a real danger as you go from boom and bust. The so-called pendulum just goes backwards and forwards. We're not out of this yet. There are still, many people still have serious debts. Unemployment is still, across the EU, is still, it never reached 10%, but it's way up there. The key secret of this is going to be putting it right once and for all, and crucially, and there is no agreement, making sure it doesn't happen again. I wish I was optimistic on that last front, but frankly, reform is taking so long and is so bogged down in nonsense that I'm not at all optimistic on that.
Now, talking about one of your shows, Business Traveller, do you still find interesting subjects during this time of crisis? Do businessmen still travel the way they used to? No, absolutely not. They do not. They are having to use low-cost carriers, whether it be EasyJet, Ryanair or Wizz Air, for going around Europe. When they go long haul, many cases now, the rules have changed. It used to be you always travelled in a business class seat. That has now just gone. They're staying in cheaper hotels. They've downgraded. Things have changed hugely. What we don't know, and the big issue, is whether we will ever go back to those better days. Best opinion suggests we probably won't. Get used to sitting at the back. I hope they will not do video conferences for holidays too, right?
But even with holidays, interestingly, the holiday is sacrosanct. We tend to always insist on taking our holidays, but instead of an expensive long-haul destination to the Caribbean or to Asia, more people are staying a little bit closer to home.
Were there any good things that came out of this recession?
Reality. A dose of reality, and I hesitate to say that that's good because there's so much misery and pain and people lost jobs and homes and families were pulled apart. But the truth is, we all learned something we should never have forgotten, that you can't spend what you haven't got, you can't borrow more than is reasonable, and the oldest rule in the book, Andrea, if it looks too good, it probably is.
Were you personally affected by the crisis? Did you lose anything financially speaking?
Well, many years ago, during the dot-com burst, back in the 1990s, I had a whole load of shares, some of them which had reached $60, $70 a share. They are now down at $1 and $2 and $3 a share. I've always kept those shares to remind me of just how bad it can get, not to get too arrogant, not to believe that one can always walk on water when it came to investing. But I have to tell you, what I don't do, I'm a pretty bad investor. I can tell you what you should be doing. I can advise you that this looks good, that's not. But when it comes to investing myself, I'd lose the shirt on my back if I was left on my own devices.
Now with the recession, are you still buying your ties, right?
Never buy an expensive tie. If a tie costs too much, for some reason, cheap ties look well on television. But I better not say that. My mother gave me this tie, and if she ever finds out I called it cheap, there'll be serious trouble.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.